And then on the briefing of the MPs, I understand where my colleague, brother who was here last week, I understand where it's coming from. But being a member of the Finance Committee, I was privileged to have had an opportunity to be briefed by the minister himself and his officials a week or so before the presentation because of my position as a member of the Finance Committee. And indeed, Parliament, through the initiative of leadership of Parliament, the minister met all chairmen and ranking members of all the committees in Koforidua prior to conclusion of the budget. And so there's been some interactions. Of course, probably my brother is not a chairman or a ranking member or a vice chair of any of the committees. I don't know. And that is why probably he was not invited to any of these briefings. But of course, if you're an MP, it's nice or right for you to be giving some heads up before the presentation of the budget, especially when you are going to be going to the media as he came here to speak to issues. So I understand him, but let me put it on record that indeed some engagement did take place, and I was privy to have been part of one of such meetings. And Uncle Kwesi, the finance minister, I rarely see him with a 4x4. If you've seen him, most of the time I even see him with a Kantanka. He drives the Kantanka car. I did not see him when he came to Parliament on the day of the presentation. And I heard Uncle Kwesi talk about the minister came to Parliament.
Well, I read it from the newspapers. I'm sure you've seen the stories.
Yes, but I'm saying that
I didn't see it.
Yes, but I'm saying that the finance minister I know, most of the times, whenever he's coming to Parliament to meet us or to do anything, he comes in a smaller saloon car. And sometimes it's a Qatar, the locally made Ghanaian car, and that's what he comes with. I don't know how he came this time around, but what I know previously is that anytime I see him with a smaller car. And so, but I understand Uncle Kwesi's point. If you are asking us to not to drive in our 4x4 in Accra, and you are coming to make a presentation, you come in a 4x4, then it means you are defeating your policy directive. But I'm just hoping that he didn't come that way and that he came as is usual with a smaller car and all that. And Uncle Kwesi made a very, very interesting point. This budget, Uncle Kwesi, was a very difficult budget, very peculiar in the sense that we are at a crossroad. And by crossroad, I mean we are on a negotiation with the fund. And so it had to find expression in the budget. Uncle Kwesi talked about the freeze on employment. Uncle Kwesi, I'm as worried as you are. Because we talked about it, but fortunately I realized that the statement went a little bit further and said that except in very critical cases, if you read the budget, paragraph 224, he said there is a freeze on recruitment into civil and public service except in very critical cases. And so there's it was the same.
The exception was there also under the
okay, I didn't know that. Yes. So there is some a leeway, and so I'm sure critical services like nurses, doctors, police, soldiers, I'm sure this statement should make it still open for government to still recruit these people into all these critical areas. And so I get Uncle Kwesi's point about the neo-colonial agenda, which essentially Uncle Kwesi referred to the president's
neoliberal agenda.
Neoliberal agenda, which Uncle Kwesi referred to the president's inaugural speech, essentially calling for a movement from the Georgesburg economy into a more productive economy. I'm sure this government, there's been some policies that was drive at that. As to whether those policies have materialized into fruition is something we can discuss. But I believe very strongly that all this while, the Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo government has been looking forward to move us from that area of Georgesburg economy into a more productive economy. And indeed, this budget, the 7-point agenda of this particular budget, one was aggressively mobilize domestic revenue, streamline and rationalize expenditure, boost local productive capacity. I'm sure this goes to the heart of trying to move from the Georgesburg economy into a more productive area. I also see promote and diversify exports. These are all areas or agendas or objectives which I believe the end point is to move us from the Georgesburg economy. As to whether we've been able to do it in the past 6 years is something that we can all discuss. Of course, the issue of our agenda, the one district farm factory, I'm sure the focus of that particular policy was to ensure that at a point in time, if not for anything at all, we should be able to produce what we eat. That for me was the focus. So if you look at the budget, Ankwesi made it very clear. Two main things: revenue and expenditure cuts. Some have argued that they do not see enough on the revenue side, and that they've seen a lot action on the expenditure side, but they are seeing a lot on the revenue side. That's quite clear. I mean, it's quite very, very clear in the budget. Government, obviously, if you look at our revenue as a percentage of our GDP, I think we are one of the lowest within the sub-region. And so obviously, government will want to increase that percentage at least to the average West African level, which is about 20 or so percent to GDP. Currently, I'm told we are about 14%, and we are trying to move it all the way to 16 or 18% by the close of year. How do you do it now is the issue, because what it then means is that you are going to then increase your tax on the ordinary people. And of course, others have argued that, especially with the VAT, others have argued that that was going to be very, very tough on Ghanaian people. And always I say, we are in a crisis situation. The president himself made it clear that we are in crisis. And I think this is the time that all of us must try as much as possible to squeeze a little bit to ensure that this economy comes up to where it used to be. The question is asking people to squeeze themselves. What are you doing as a government yourself to demonstrate that you also feel the pinch? I'm told the 30% cut is still going to continue for all government workers. And in fact, if you look at the expenditure, some of the expenditure measures, conferences, government is talking about conferences as much as possible. If you have an office in Accra, a ministry in Accra, you want to have a conference, let's try as much as possible to have the conference in-house rather than moving it to other areas, also to help to reduce the cost. This has also been talked about. I'm also happy about, I'm sure Ankwesi is happy about the tax exemption freeze on all foreign companies, which the minister announced, which is in line with the tax exemptions bill that was recently passed. So by and large, Ankwesi,
there's one that you haven't spoken about, the curb on unessential travels of public officials.
Yes.
And if you're going to talk about that, I would like you to weigh it against the number of ministers and deputy ministers we are seeing.
So it was a question I was going to ask that.
Sitting in the crowd and clapping for the Black Stars.
Okay, so
are those essential travels?
Okay, so I think the point of the non-essential travels is you can't do so on the government budget.
So those people went there private budget.
Private.
Are you sure?
Yes, I'm sure of that. In fact, this year government did not sponsor. In fact, government has made it clear. The minister was at our committee. I was on the Youth and Sports Committee. He made it very clear that government was not sponsoring any person to Qatar. And that
has been contradicted. I'm sure you know that it has been contradicted.
I've not heard so.
I've followed interviews of supporters unions and their leaders who are claiming that they are getting substantial subsidy from government.
No, I'm aware that some corporate organizations.
No, they said government.
I've not heard those tapes, but I'm aware that based on the official meeting we had with the minister, and I remember one of your sister stations, Joy, had earlier on made this comment, and they had to come back to apologize because indeed we got to know that some corporate organizations are the ones sponsoring. So, to the best of
the monies to government for government to, or how is it happening?
I don't know of the arrangement. What I know is that
government is not sponsoring. Leaders of the supporters.
What I know is that government is not sponsoring.
That they are getting substantial help from government.
What I'm saying that
government. If what you're saying is right,
yes,
I will concede.
Yes.
You know,
but in fact, this is official.
So it would then mean
this is official.
It would then mean that the supporters, who are there, who are sitting on television saying that they're getting substantial assistance from government, are not telling us the truth.
Yes, the information I have is that government is not sponsoring.
I'll go by what you say.
Government is not sponsoring. So the ministers who are there, I'm sure they are on their own. They went there on their own finance and had nothing to do with the government spending on them whilst there. But I get your point. I mean, yesterday there was a lot of debate about ministers, their budgets is in. Essentially, when you go to the appropriations, they will have to come and speak to those figures. So why are they there? But of course, I'm sure that what we're having now is a policy debate, and when we get to the appropriation by then, I'm sure most of them will be back. So that is what I know about the travels, about the travel. So I'm going to say, yes, right. A lot is happening on the expenditure side. Government is trying very hard to push a lot of the non-essentials. I'm so excited about the tax waivers that we are halting on foreign companies, because I'm going to sit on the finance committee every day. When you get requests of tax waivers, you wonder why we are giving so much especially to a lot of foreign companies. And indeed, I was discussing with a colleague, friend of mine who's on the other side, for us to file an urgent question to get the minister, for us to gauge the value we have derived as a country of all the tax exemption that we've given over the years. So this is something that we are looking at.